Hey, everyone. Let's start healing. I'm Adrienne Murchison, and welcome to episode 86 of the Let's Start Healing podcast. We have more in common than we think, and what we have in common can change the world. I am so excited about this episode. I've been waiting to talk about the overturning of Roe v. Wade and just thinking about what I wanted to really say about it. I have my guest today. She is in Buffalo, New York. Her name is Laurie Gilbert. She is actually my cousin, and she has worked in family planning. Well, I should say she worked in family planning for 46 years. She retired last year. Laurie was the manager of the Kaleida Health Family Planning Clinic in Buffalo, New York. And I really wanted to just have her voice in an episode about what this means for underserved communities and what some of her experiences were in her work. So we talk about that. We talk about many things related to this issue. And we even touch on our own experiences with abortion. I mentioned an experience that I had when I was in college. I go into it, but one thing that I didn't mention was I remember after I had the abortion, I had it on November 12th. So I actually think about it every November 12th. And when I went home for Christmas, I was home by myself, and my mom came in from work. My dad was at work, and my brothers, they already knew about it, and they weren't living at home at the time. And I just remember being up in my parents' bedroom. I was sitting on my parents' bed, and my mom came home, and I remember telling her what happened. And a friend of mine yesterday was just talking about how I just remember so many details when I reflect on stories or past experiences, but I definitely remember what my mom had on, because my mom was the most beautiful person in the world to me. And it was wintertime, and she had on like this cream colored sort of wool-like turtleneck, and she was thin, and so she had on that turtleneck with this skirt. And I just remember her sitting on the bed, and we hadn't seen each other. Of course, we talked often, and so she wanted to know how I was doing. We were catching up, and I told her about it. And my mom's not living, and she's my heart. My heart is her heart, and I think she'd be okay if I say what I'm about to say. So I told her, and then she tells me about her abortion experience. Now, I have two brothers. My mom was pregnant before my oldest brother, Russ. Both of my brothers have now passed away, but my mom was pregnant before my oldest brother was born, and she miscarried at 7 months with that pregnancy. And that's what I knew about. But what I didn't know about was how she was pregnant years before she met my dad. And, she was telling me that she had an abortion. Now, gosh, this had to be around 1950 or the late 1940s. It was either, in the early 50s or late 1940s that she had an abortion. And I think that's amazing that she had an abortion when abortion wasn't legal, when it had to be risky. And she went on and did give birth to 3 healthy children. As I said, she miscarried the oldest child, or the first child, at 7 months. When I say the first child, that is the child that was before my brother Russ was born. But that was really the fault of her doctor. We would discuss this throughout my life about how she lost that baby, who was named Brian. And she had toxemia, and which was too much salt in her body and in her diet, as far as I understand. And it was something that she said could have always been prevented. So I'm digressing, but when I think about that abortion experience that I had, I just remember the love of my mom that she showered on me. And when she lost the baby, Brian, at 7 months, this was not her abortion experience. This was her miscarriage that she had. She would tell me about how she was in this hospital, and it was in a Catholic hospital, and she was so upset about losing this baby, and she was in the hospital bed, and she was looking at the doorway, and my mom thought she saw Mary, Mother Mary, the Virgin Mary. She thought she saw the shadow of Mary in the doorway, and it was somebody in the hallway, and she saw a shadow. And she just thought that Mary was there comforting her. And she had a strong relationship spiritually with Mary, as do I. And somebody eventually came in the room, and it was a nurse came in the room. And I remember that wasn't the shadow that my mom saw. And she was asking the nurse, was there anybody else there? But the nurse said no. And my mom always thought that, as I said, Mary showed up in spirit there. And so when I had that abortion, it was very upsetting for me. And I remember my roommate, Nikki, was really supportive of me also when it happened. Another friend went with me to have it. Me and I was just crying. And then when I got home to the apartment that Nikki and I were sharing, she was really supportive also. And I remember I was laying down on my bed, and it was night, and the lights were off, but the TV was on, and I was in the room by myself at one point because we shared a room. We were in a 2-bedroom apartment that was a part of the school. So there was 2 twin beds in each bedroom. So Nikki wasn't in the room at the time, and I was upset, and I was laying there. Lights are off. The TV is on, so the light of the TV is filling the room because it's nighttime. And you know how you're in that space where you're not fully asleep, you're not fully awake. I don't know if that's REM sleep or whatever it is. I remember feeling like I felt Mary with me spiritually. And I just remember just feeling this presence that I thought was Mary. I don't know if that actually was it. I know it feels like it was it, or if it was because I was remembering my mom's experience. And this was before I actually told my mom. So this was in November. I went home in December, but my mom had told me about the miscarriage and that experience that she had. So it's not a light thing to have an abortion. We're strong. Women are so strong. And especially a strong woman, people think that strong women don't need anybody, don't feel anything. That is not true. This is not a light topic. This is a really heavy topic, a heavy controversial topic. And I feel like, how dare someone, these lawmakers out here, dictate what a woman does with her body? How dare you? I mean, the things that women are subjected to, we're subjected to harassment, abuse of all sorts, sexually, discrimination. There's so many things that women are subjected to. What is the number? I know men and women endure abuse as children. I think for men, if I have this right, I didn't look it up, and I think it's 1 in 6 boys and 1 in 4 girls are sexually abused as children. And so you can rest assured that you personally know several women who have been abused. You can rest assured that you know that, who have been abused by men. And then men, by and large, there are women who are against a woman's right to choose. But I feel that this is so driven by men in trying to dictate what a woman does with her body. And as my guest will point out, A woman's going to do what she wants to do with her body. She's going to do what she wants to do. If she wants to have an abortion, she's going to find a way to have an abortion. I just happened to be recording this on the 4th of July, and I was down at the Peachtree Road race supporting a friend, and there were protesters there, and they had some interesting signs. A group of protesters were chanting about the overturning of Roe v. Wade. One person had a sketch of a uterus, and then it had handprints around it that were in red. The wording says, "Don't tread on me." Someone had a sign that said, "Bodily autonomy is a human right." Someone else had a sign that said, "Abort the Supreme Court." Someone else had a sign that says, "Pregnancy begins with a penis. Regulate that." Liberty, equality, and justice for women. Forced motherhood equals female enslavement. When women are not free, no one is free. Someone else had a sign that said, "Forced birth is a warfare." Pew Research has done quite a bit of polling on public opinion on abortion. I am looking at some data that was published in May. It starts out saying that from 1995 to 2022, while public support for legal abortion has fluctuated over the 2 decades, it has remained relatively stable for the past several years. So that makes me think, so why now? What's up? Anyway, it says currently 61% say abortion should be legal in all or most cases, while 37% say it should be illegal in all or most cases. So if we go by religious affiliation, white evangelical Protestants, most say it should be illegal in all cases. That is 74 to 24. People with no affiliation at all, 84% said it should be legal in all cases. If we go to white Protestants who are not evangelical, it was 60 who say it should be legal in all or most cases. Black Protestant, 66. Catholic, 56. And if we say Democrat or Republican leaning, well, 60 on the Republican side say it should be illegal in all or most cases. And on Democrat, it says 80% say it should be legal in all or most cases. Let me go down to gender. Women, 63% of women say it should be legal in all or most cases, 58% of men. Race or ethnic identity, white, black, Hispanic, and Asian, all well over 50% say it should be legal in all or most cases. Asians, 74%. Hispanic, 60, black, 68, white, 59. Views on abortion by age. Well, 18 to 29, 74%. 30 to 49, 62% say it should be legal in all or most cases. Ages 50 to 64, 55%. And over 65, 54% say it should be legal in all or most cases. And when we get down to level of education, that is interesting. People with high school or less, 54% say it should be legal in most cases. And then it goes up. If you have some college, 63%. If you're a college grad or more, 66%. So I thought that was interesting, and I just wanted to share that with you. We touch on so many things along the journey of talking about the overturning of Roe v. Wade in this episode. We touch on older conservative white men, conservative black men, several different things. So we go there a little bit. And one of the things that we touch on for a minute is a text exchange that I had with a family member, a male family member, the night before recording the podcast. And what happened was Laurie's son is Charles Gilbert, who has been a guest on Let's Start Healing, and I've been a guest on his podcast. He is a podcast master. His latest podcast is called So in the Meantime. Charles, he stirred the pot a little bit the night before by posting in a chat with me and another family member a video from Elle Duncan on ESPN. It was a clip. And basically she was talking about the need for men to be supportive of the women who believe that they have a right to choose when it comes to their bodies and when it comes to abortion. And so Charles posted that in the chat, and that spurred an exchange between me and another family member, and that inspired a little piece of the conversation that took place in this episode. So I just wanted you to have some backstory when that comes up. And since Laurie is in Buffalo, I do check in with her about how the city is doing and rebounding from the horrific shooting in May at the Top supermarket. Before we get started, I want to invite you to subscribe to the podcast. You can listen to it on traditional podcast platforms. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, to name 4. So let's get started. Let's meet her and let's start healing. So welcome, Laurie.
Hi, Adrian. You got me.
I know. I was about to say, I don't know why you said yes, but I'm glad you said yes. And I was telling you that having this conversation I want to have, I realized it was so on point because when I called you to leave a message, a short while after that, a friend of mine had posted on Facebook just making a comment about being a single mom and the choice she made to have her child. But, you know, it's a hard decision. She was acknowledging it's a hard decision. It's a economical decision. It's a life decision. And so my thing is I wanted to really talk with you because of your career in family planning and just this is something that I had imagined you must have dealt with professionally just in terms of your work and the experiences of the women who came through your clinic. Before we get to that, do you remember when abortion became legal? Because I was thinking about my age, and you're a little bit older than me, and I don't remember because I wasn't paying attention to the news like that at that time.
It was what, in 73
Yeah.
that it became legal? Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Because it was 2 years later when I had to use the service.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I was 19. I was in my first or second year of college. I can't remember. And I had an IUD, and so I figured I was safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't. So because I had no job, I was in school. I knew that having a child at that time was not good for me or the child.
Yeah.
So I made the decision to have an abortion.
Was it a decision that you kept to yourself? Did you share it with the father or your parents? Or
I didn't share it with anybody. It was a decision I made.
Yeah.
The father didn't even live in Buffalo. He lived in he was in school in West Virginia. So he never knew.
That's a lot to carry by yourself.
Yeah, but I didn't want him to feel like he had to give up on his dreams because of a mistake.
Yeah.
You know, and it was a mistake. I mean, I thought I was protected and I wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I had one as well. And I was in my sophomore year of college. So I guess I was around the same age, 19. And I told Russ and Jeff, my brothers, for the audience, and they sent me money to help me pay for it. I never told the guy, and I never thought about Like, it wasn't even a thought to tell the guy because it was like a decision, you know?
Yeah.
It was my
Yeah.
decision. And my fear was if I didn't do this, I was going to have to go back home because I was in Atlanta. And if I didn't do this, I was going to have to go back to Buffalo. I didn't want to go back to Buffalo. And I did tell my mom when I went home for Christmas. I did tell her. But so I was thinking, you know, everybody in the family knew but my dad.
And see, I didn't tell anyone. I can't even remember how I got the money to pay for it. I can't remember how I did that. But I didn't tell anybody.
Yeah, yeah. Do you remember if it was emotional? It was an emotional thing for me.
It was emotional. And I remember that I was, they have you sit in the waiting room for a little while afterwards to make sure you're okay. And when I left, they asked me if I had a ride, and I told them no, I was taking the bus home.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at the bus stop, and the nurse drove by and saw me, and she
Mm-hmm.
took me home. And she said, "You should have had somebody pick you up."
Yeah.
And I told her I didn't want to tell anybody, so I couldn't have anyone pick me up. So
Right.
I just figured I'd be okay, and I'd take the bus and go home.
Gosh. And we've been hearing about the possibility of Roe v. Wade being overturned for a while, not just in the last, few months. What have your thoughts been?
That if they overturn it, it's not going to stop abortions, it's going to stop safe abortions.
Mm-hmm.
Because prior to Roe versus Wade, women were having abortions illegally, some dying, some being permanently sterilized because of it. So my thought was that abortions will still be, they just won't be safe.
Right, right.
And I don't understand why they are not excluding incest and rape, because I just read an article about a 10-year-old girl
Yeah.
in Ohio
Mm-hmm.
who was pregnant in Ohio at 6 weeks, and she was 6 weeks and 3 days. They took her to Indiana. Now she, thank goodness, had the ability to get to Indiana.
Right.
But what if she didn't?
Right.
The 10-year-old's body is not developed enough to have a baby.
Right. Right.
And you can't adopt a child at 10. So why are you forcing a child to have a baby at 10, especially through incest?
Right.
That's just horrible.
You made a comment the other day when we were on the phone that I thought was a powerful comment. You said, how can you ask a woman to give birth to a child that she doesn't want, and then you don't want to help that woman raise the child or provide services for the child?
Yeah, the Republicans have voted down anything that might help a child. They voted down the problem with the baby formula. And to ease that up, they voted that down. They voted down domestic terrorism bills. And they voted down American Jobs Act, which would provide jobs for people, and then they would be able to provide services or money rather for the child.
Right.
I don't understand their logic behind anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't feel that our society really cares about children. I really don't.
No, once they're born, then it's a dead deal.
Right.
They don't care.
Right, right. So how did you get into family planning?
I had left school. I dropped out in my sophomore year and got a job as a secretary with family planning because a good friend of mine worked there, and she knew I was looking for a job. And so she recommended me. I think my interview process was about 5 minutes, got the job. And it was just seeing all these girls coming in with different issues, different problems, and wanting birth control.
Yeah.
Or those that even came in and didn't want birth control. And we talked to them about the consequences if they're having sex.
Yeah.
And using any type of protection, what could happen. And eventually just being in that field. And at first I was like a secretary counselor. So I would talk to the girls about their decisions and what they wanted to do and what they wanted to do in their life. And as opportunities came about for me, I just went up the ladder. I was
Of
the
the clinic.
assistant director at one time. Then
Mm-hmm.
I was the director. Then the hospital changed titles for
Mm-hmm.
everybody. So I went from a director to a manager, but I was still responsible for everything.
Yeah. Would you say that most or half or many were underserved? What areas of town did they come from?
That was the purpose of our grant, was to serve the underserved population. So we were located in an underserved area. We did advertisement for
Mm-hmm.
that underserved area. Those were basically the only patients that we were supposed to see, though we did not reject anybody. Anybody who came in for our services, we would see them.
Yeah.
But our main goal was to serve the underserved population.
Is there anything that you think that we don't understand about Roe v. Wade being overturned when it comes to underserved communities?
I think the people that understand Roe versus Wade
Mm-hmm.
understand the impact it will have on underserved communities. It is the people who are supposed to be pro-life that really don't care.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's not that they're not concerned or they don't know about it. I think they just don't care. And that's
That
the problem.
people will be forced to have a child that they maybe can't afford, or maybe they're in an abusive situation, or what are some of the things?
A woman who has a child that she doesn't want could end up abusing that child because that child has come into her life and she didn't want that baby there,
Mm-hmm.
abandoning the baby.
Yeah.
There's just so many avenues or roads that people will take because they're forced to do something they don't want to do. And I'm not saying that everybody will do that. There will be some women, of course, who will embrace it and do what they have to do.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is when you start forcing us to do something that we don't want to do,
Right.
you create a whole lot of problems.
And I feel this is a control issue. I really
Yeah,
do. I
definitely.
mean, because if you don't care about kids, which I don't think that these lawmakers do, then what are you doing it for? Why are you doing this?
Well, one man I heard on the news the other day say, some congressman, saying that a woman who is raped and gets pregnant, that it's God's way of telling her that she needs to have this baby.
Mm.
And that's just totally ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
You want to punish the doctors and the providers, but you don't punish the rapists.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. At your clinic that you worked at, which you were there for 46 years,
Yep.
that is
46. Yep.
incredible. What did you see? I mean, you must have seen a lot of changes in terms of the freedom around sexuality, too. I mean, I remember when I went away to college, the first thing I did was get on the pill as soon as I got to college. I
Yeah.
mean, did you see a lot of freedom or changes, or, what are some of the things you saw between when you started and when you retired?
When I started, there were a lot more women coming in for birth control, for contraceptives. The STD numbers weren't as high. Now you have these teenagers who are coming in for STD testing or pregnancy testing, but they don't want a birth control method because of what they've heard in the media
Mm.
about negativeness. So what I started seeing was a decline of patients coming in for birth control. And so we started a campaign to try to increase the number of patients coming in. And we have excellent practitioners that would talk to the patients to explain to them the importance of them using a method if they don't plan on getting pregnant, and then trying to convince teenagers that getting pregnant when you're 16 is not the best. You're not ready to have a baby.
Right, right.
And if you're doing it because all your friends are doing it, that's not why you should get pregnant.
When you said the negativity around the pill, meaning side effects, or
There was some news stories out that were talking about the pill, talking about the IUD. IUD is supposedly making you abort the baby. And they listen to this and they look on Facebook and other social medias and they read these negative comments about the pill,
Yeah.
or about IUDs or something. And that's where their decision comes in. I don't want the pill because it's going to make me have cancer, or I don't want the pill because I won't have periods anymore. I watched the decline. Also, with us, we were federally and state funded, and the federal guidelines state that we could not do any political activities. So, like Planned Parenthood can go out and do campaigns and go to the congressmen or the senators, and we couldn't do that. And at one point, Collider was very, very conservative. So advertisement was done, but it was minimum, and it had to be a certain way, certain wordings.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want any problems.
You were telling me the other day that at your clinic, if somebody came in and they wanted to have an abortion, they weren't performed at your clinic, and you could or you could not refer them somewhere else.
In the beginning, the federal law was we could not refer them. We couldn't tell them anything about abortions. And so we would get phone calls from people, and some of them were, they set you up to see what you're going to say. So we would get phone calls, I'm calling, have an abortion, and we have to tell them, we're sorry, we don't provide that service. Well, can you tell me where I can go? And all we could tell them is, you have to look it up in the phone book. I can't give you that information. Later on, the rules slacked up a little bit, and we were able to give them referrals. We couldn't talk to them about it, but we had a pamphlet that we developed, and we gave that to them, which was called a pregnancy option pamphlet. And it gave them the option of adoption, foster care, abortion, or maintaining prenatal care. And then they had to make that decision. Just recently, right before I retired, they changed that up and said that we could now talk to them about abortions and then tell them where they could go to have one if they wanted one.
Can you remember or share any experiences of people who came in? And I mean, abortion is not an easy decision.
No, it's not.
Can you remember any experiences of any of the women who came in and them trying to come to a decision, or anything that happened?
The one thing that stands out the most in my mind, it was an 11-year-old girl.
11-year-old girl?
11, who came in with her mother. And the mother was concerned because she found out her daughter was having sex with an older teenager. Found out that she was not only pregnant, but HIV positive. And while we were talking to her mother, because we have to get consent from the patient to talk to a parent. We cannot tell a parent anything about what's going on in the clinic with that person unless that patient tells us. But she was 11.
Right.
So she was like, yeah, you can tell my mom. And she was sitting in the waiting room coloring in a coloring book while her mother was having a nervous breakdown in the exam room, learning that her child not only is pregnant, but HIV positive. But thankfully, abortions are legal then. And so the girl was able to have an abortion, but she didn't understand anything of what was going on. That was the thing that stands out in my mind for the whole career span that I was there.
Yeah.
Looking at this little girl sitting there coloring.
Wow. And New York State is a place where today women can have an abortion.
Yes. Thank God. Yeah. There's not that many states. I tried to look up to see. I think there's 26 states who have outright banned abortion. And then there's the trigger states.
Yeah.
Where if Roe v. Wade was overturned, these triggers come in and they can stop abortions or restrict abortions. Yeah. But like in Ohio, 6 weeks, You don't know, half the time you don't know you're pregnant at 6 weeks.
Right. Right.
And Texas is just absolutely horrible.
Yeah. I was about to bring that up about you were thinking about moving to Texas.
Yeah. I like Texas, but
Yeah.
I don't like the government there.
Yeah.
And I don't think I could survive in an environment like that.
Mm-hmm. I was reading an article where this young woman was describing how she went about being able to get an abortion. And I mean, she had to, I forgot what state she was in, but she set up like a virtual mailbox in another city to show that she was a resident, in another state. Through that loophole, somehow she was able to get an abortion somewhere. But she had to go through all these different things, and didn't tell anybody. She didn't tell anybody. She went through this whole experience by herself.
At one point, they were trying to restrict people from going to other states to get abortions.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, a lot of that got voted down.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure what the Supreme Court is going to do now with Clarence Thomas talking about banning contraceptive also. Okay, because then you want everybody to get pregnant.
Exactly.
Okay. But
Exactly.
they're saying no, they should abstain. They should not have sex if they don't want to have a baby, because that's what the purpose of sex is for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh my God. I mean, how do you feel about the state of the world right now? I mean, I think up until now, I was kind of, even though we see a lot of hate and division, I was optimistic about the world. I feel like we don't really see a lot of the love or the open-mindedness that's out there. That's not presented in the media. But just this morning, I was reading this article about abortion abolitionists. And this guy who is in his 40s and basically has a church and so many followers. And, that he believes that women should go to prison if they have an abortion.
Yeah, because they think it's murder.
Yeah. It's one thing to be one individual who thinks this, but then he has this huge following. It's crazy.
At the abortion clinics that we have here, and one is on Main Street. So when I drive down Main, I can see they have protesters out there with signs up.
Mm-hmm.
And the majority of the time, they're old white men or old white women. Okay. Men can't have babies. So they should not be anywhere near trying to tell me what I can or cannot do with my body.
Right.
And older white women, I don't understand. I don't have any understanding of why people are so adamant about being in your business.
Yeah.
Now, I'll tell you this. I was reading something about how they wanted to ban Clarence Thomas from teaching. He teaches law at some university.
Uh-huh.
The students wanted to ban him from that.
Mm-hmm.
And what they said was, if you don't like what he's saying, then just don't go to his class. Well, that's the same thing about abortion. If you do not agree with abortion, don't have one.
Right.
Don't tell me what I can or cannot do.
Right. It's a distraction from dealing with self, to me. Worry about your own self, like you're saying, rather than what I do with my body.
Yeah, because I mean, if your choice is that you don't believe in abortion, that's fine. That's your choice.
Mm-hmm.
But my choice is different.
Right.
And I'm not trying to put my choice on you. So why are you trying to do it to me?
Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of race because I really could, because I'm going back to, because I mean, if you saying that is making me think of control and slavery, and where do these ideas come from of trying to control what other people do? That's coming from a place of entitlement and, a thought of, I have a right to do this. I have a right to tell you what you should do about you.
Well, see, one of the theories is the replacement theory. They don't really care about Black babies. They're just trying to make sure that white babies are brought into this world to
Mm-hmm.
replenish the population. You know, they could care less
Mm-hmm.
if a Black woman has an abortion or not,
Right.
because they're so afraid of losing that majority.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see that being true. I mean, this isn't a new issue, abortion, getting rid of abortion and the right to choose, but I could see that really being true since 2016. And just the fear, I think that older white men have a fear of extinction. So I could see that being true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Do you talk about this with family, or there's a lot of women in our family?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
is it a conversation
I've
that's been
had
percolating?
conversations, say, with my sisters.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had a conversation with my sons. It was interesting reading what you and Russ were talking about,
Yeah.
because to me, it's a woman's decision.
Yeah.
And though you might have a partner that will agree or disagree, that partner does not have to carry that child. And the majority of the time, the woman is the one who's responsible for that child. The
Mm-hmm.
man might be there, he might not. He might be supportive, he might not. But the woman is the main character
Mm-hmm.
that takes care of that child. So I have not really talked to men a lot about it, but we did have men in our clinic, 2 men that were employed in our clinic.
Mm-hmm.
And they agreed with the right to choose also.
Yeah. I do think that men have a right to have a say, to weigh in on, if a woman is considering an abortion. But even though I think that, it wasn't a factor for me. I had like tunnel vision, like this is what I'm going to do.
Right.
So I think it's not fair to the man, but it's still the way it is,
And my thought was I was never going to tell him
Mm-hmm.
about it, because we weren't really in a relationship.
Yeah.
It was like we met, we hooked up,
Yeah.
but there was no relationship there.
Yeah.
So for me to tell him would put him in a position where he might feel that he's obligated in some kind of way, and he shouldn't have been.
Right. Right.
You know.
The exchange that you were reading, that was spurred from a video that Charles shared of Elle Duncan from ESPN talking about support coming from men on, this topic. And so I do think that men should weigh in on this, whether they're not treated fairly when an abortion issue comes up, or whether they think it's a woman's right to choose, or whether they don't think, whether they're pro-life, rather than, I think we're all pro-life. It's just having a right to choose. But I think regardless, that men's voices, other than the conservative men who have overturned this, I think that their voices should be heard. So that's what that was about.
Okay.
I think that also a lot of black men, I'm being very general, I'm generalizing right now, but I think a lot of black men are conservative in some ways and really don't think abortion is right. And because I've heard different comments over the years in the family and among friends. And so I think that men might not be as open-minded about this issue.
Mm-hmm.
Some black men might not be as open-minded about this issue as we might like them to be. Now, I could be wrong. I'm generalizing, but that's what I think.
I had a conversation one time, and I'm not going to say who it was with, but he said to me, I don't agree with it, but it's not my choice. I'm not the one who has to deal with the pregnancy.
Yeah.
So though I don't want it,
Though what?
though I don't want this to happen,
Mm-hmm.
I can't stop it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they might, like you said, not agree with it, but
Mm-hmm.
some men think they don't have a say so in it.
Yeah. And I think that's unfair. I'm acknowledging I think that could be unfair, but it's just unfair. I mean, it just is.
And I mean, if you just, we'll see how men step up
Mm-hmm.
with this Roe v. Wade, because there will be some women who will have the baby and give the baby up. Will the
Mm-hmm.
father step in and take the baby?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see how
Mm-hmm.
many do that.
Yeah. And then there's situations where, the pregnancy may go full term, but the baby, they're missing things. They don't have all their limbs or their eyes or,
Right.
different things. I mean, those are real situations that happen.
And they don't care.
Yeah.
The conservatives don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this one man said, as soon as the egg is fertilized, that's life. And it doesn't matter if the child has some disease, if the child is not going to make it through the pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I heard one man saying that a woman should be arrested because she had a miscarriage,
Mm-hmm.
because she
Mm-hmm.
did something to allow the baby to die.
Mm-hmm.
And that's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that just like, now we're in the system, whether or not we have had COVID or whether or not we are vaccinated, if this continues, there's going to be some way of identifying women in terms of whether or not they had kids and a stigma, attached to them around whether or not you had kids, whether or not you had an abortion or miscarriage. I mean, it's not going to just stop here.
No, it's not.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
And that's scary.
Yeah.
That's scary.
Yep. So one of the reasons that I love you so much is because
I love you too.
is that we, have a spiritual connection. I don't know how it started. I think we realized that there was something simpatico to me about, the way we look at things spiritually. Not that they're identical, but there was something simpatico, I think. Mm-hmm. And so I want to ask you these questions, and I'm just looking forward to your take on some of these things. Okay. How would you describe your knowing or your perception of God?
A feeling, knowing that when something is not right, that he is always there to protect me and to guide me, whether it's something that I want or don't want. Whatever his view is what I have to accept. So it is a deep down in my soul feeling that he is always with me.
Wow, that's beautiful. When do you most feel the presence?
Every day. Every day. When I walk out the door, he's there protecting me. When I get in my car and drive, he's there protecting me. If something should happen to me, he's there. Every day.
Are there moments when you feel like you feel God with you right now? Like you're just going through a daily activity and you just feel like, I feel God right now.
Because I feel like he's with me all the time.
Yeah.
There are times when something might have happened to me.
Yeah.
And I'm in a situation that I could have gotten extremely hurt in. It was God that pulled me out of there.
Yeah.
Yeah. With a warning.
Is there anything that you think God has called you to do for yourself or for others, whether it's in your personal life or, in the work that you were doing?
I think in the work that I was doing, because I became so passionate with it, I think that was my calling. Raising my sons into becoming the men that they are.
Yeah.
I did a lot of praying because I was so worried that I would not be able to teach them how to be the men that they have become. And I think through God, I did a pretty good job.
You did a phenomenal job.
Thank you.
Phenomenal, phenomenal. Was there a message, an overriding message in the clinic with the women who would come in that you wanted to convey to them? A message of support or something you wanted them to know that you maybe realized they don't know this. I want them to know this.
Through my staff
Yeah.
and through meetings with them, it was to let those patients know that we're there to support them with whatever decision they make.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to chastise them. We're not going to blame them. We're not going to try to change their opinion. We're there to support whatever decision they make.
Mm-hmm.
But we try to educate them so that the decision they make is an educated one.
Right. Right. Wow. So, is there a time you can tell me when you received a blessing or a miracle that you said to yourself, this is completely God. I didn't have anything to do with this?
When my marriage broke up. And I mean, that might sound horrible,
Mm-hmm.
but because of everything that I went through, when I finally said, I can't do this anymore, and I asked God, what should I do?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to do. And one of the things that I was always taught was, you say a prayer and then you have to sit back and listen and wait to hear what God says. And I sat back and God said, let it go.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the best decision that I ever made in my life, was to let it go.
Everything shifted.
It shifted very positively.
Mm-hmm.
The atmosphere in the house changed because there was so much fear from my sons. If they were too loud, their father would get angry. If they did something, their father would get angry. And when he finally left, the calmness that came over
Mm-hmm.
was a wonderful feeling. And that was nothing but God.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing but God.
You said something that is so obvious, but it's like an awareness that I just really started focusing on. You mentioned like asking God, and then you have to sit back and listen. And I was listening to someone who was talking about how it's a different energy around the question or the request or the prayer. That has like one type of energy. And then the listening part is a different energy.
Yeah.
And it's really important to be in that energy after you say the prayer.
Right. Right. I always tell Grady and Charles when they're going through something, and I said, let go and let God. Okay.
Yeah.
You have to let it go and let God guide you.
Yeah.
And that's what I've had to do. And that's what I teach them to do.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, let me ask you this before we go. I really, really appreciate you doing this.
No problem. Don't ask me again.
You are in Buffalo. You are near where the shooting took place in May. Can you speak to that a little bit, and how is the city doing, and how have you rebounded from that?
When that shooting happened, Charles called me.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, Mom, I'm okay. And I'm like, okay, what are you talking about? And he was a block away from the shooting. And he was recording a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And his friend who was there decided he was going to go to the store and was going to go to Tops, but changed his mind and went to the store that was like across the street from where they were at.
Mm-hmm.
But he saw the bodies laying in the parking lot, and he saw them when they brought the man out. And he went back into the building that Charles was in and told them something just happened at Tops. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
I would go to that Tops all the time because they truthfully have the best fried chicken in the world.
So I've heard. And that you could smell it.
You could
outside.
smell it. Yes. Where our clinic was, which was like at Main and Riley,
Mm-hmm.
and they were on Riley and Jefferson,
Mm-hmm.
which is maybe about 5 blocks away.
Yeah.
you could smell that chicken when you walked out the clinic.
Wow.
I mean, it was wonderful. So I would go there all the time for lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And I could only imagine what if I was in that store when that happened?
Yeah.
Or what if my kids were in that store, or even in the parking lot?
Mm-hmm.
You know, this man just was a demon.
Yeah.
I've only gone by once to see the memorial, and that was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
My secretary said that she had a panic attack because she comes down Jefferson to go to work. And she said when she hit East Utica, which is about a block away from Tops, she said she saw all the flowers and the pictures and everything. And she said, I just had a panic attack. I had to pull over and stop driving. People are trying to adjust. And Tops has, my understanding, because I haven't been back over there, renovated not only the inside but the outside of the building to try to make it look different. Because some people are saying that they'll never be able to go back into that Tops.
Yeah.
The mayor said he thought he would have a problem too, but when he walked in the door, it was entirely different than the way it used to be.
So it's reopened?
It's not yet. Not yet. They're still remodeling.
Right.
Yeah. But there are some people who are saying, no, I can't go back in there.
Yeah.
But then there's a lot of people who live in that neighborhood, and that's the only grocery store around them. So they don't have a choice. You know, so I'm glad they're remodeling it. I don't know if I could ever go back in there. I really don't know. Because the fear of somebody else standing in the parking lot.
Yeah.
You know, and I saw the video, which was absolutely horrible. Okay. I saw the video of him when he got out the car, when he shot the first two people.
Yeah, I saw that.
And then went into the store. You know, that was horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Laurie.
You are welcome, honey. You are more than welcome.
Thank you for joining us. Let me know what you think about this episode. Remember to subscribe to the podcast, and you can listen on traditional podcast platforms. Until next time, let's start healing.